talk about the erosion of civil liberties and respect for civil liberties in Western countries, and something about the hypocrisy of Western countries in their criticisms of other countries compared to what is actually happening at home. The remarks I make will be particularly focused on the United Kingdom, because it's where I come from. But parallel actions are happening across the Western world. In the UK, we've had 3 recent pieces of legislation in the last few years. We've had a new National Security Act, a new Public Order Act, and a new Online Safety Act. The latter is currently still going through Parliament. The Public Order Act makes it illegal, essentially, to hold a rally or demonstration if it inconveniences anybody. Now, if you hold a rally and demonstration and it inconveniences nobody, you're not doing it properly. It's an extremely low bar for freedom of assembly, because obviously if you block a street, that inconveniences someone, even if it's a police-organised diversion to go around. It essentially gives the people almost, the state almost unlimited power to clamp down on those demonstrations it wishes to clamp down upon. The National Security Act makes it illegal to accept funding if it comes from a hostile state not being defined in law. And you don't necessarily need to know where the money's coming from. For example, I work nowadays in alternative media, and I have subscribers to my blog. And if one of those subscribers to the blog, and I don't know who they are, turns out to be somebody from somewhere the UK chooses to define as a hostile state, then my blog can be closed down and I can be tried. The Online Safety Act is going to make the publication of misinformation a criminal offence, and of course it's the government that decides what is misinformation. And there are numerous questions where the official narrative is at variance with what ordinary people believe to be the case. These are scary intrusions on the public realm. And it's getting worse. Since the massive demonstrations over the genocide in Gaza have started, there has been a great panic throughout the Western world over the loss of the control of the narrative by the ruling powers, because the political and media classes throughout the Western world are very much under the influence of the Zionist lobby, simply because they are paid. That's why they are under the influence of the Zionist lobby. They are paid to be. And what is really happening in Gaza is extremely different to what you will see in the BBC or reading in The Guardian. And people know that because they see it on their mobile telephones, and the state does not like that. So these clampdowns, particularly clampdowns on freedom of speech and freedom of assembly throughout the Western world, have been exaggerated and boosted since the latest, not since the genocide started on the 8th of October, because that's not when the genocide started. The genocide started 70 years ago. But since this latest accelerated phase of the genocide, there has been an increasing desperation to retain control of a narrative by Western governments. And one thing they use in particular is anti-terrorism powers. I was arrested. I'm a former British ambassador. I'm a former rector of the University of Dundee. I was, well, the official word is detained, not arrested, at Glasgow airport in mid-October on returning from a meeting in Iceland. I'd actually been at a WikiLeaks stroke Defend Assange meeting in Iceland, and while I was there, I attended a pro-Palestine demonstration. And I was arrested, or I was detained at the airport on the way home by the people who called themselves the counter-terrorism police, though they were in plain clothes. They did not identify themselves, and personally I think they included the security services. And under the Terrorism Act, if you're detained at an airport, you have no right to remain silent, you have no right to a lawyer, and you must hand over all your electronic devices and the passwords to them, which I had to do. It's 2 years in prison for just refusing to hand over your electronic devices. 2 years in prison for refusing to answer a question. I was asked why I had attended the demonstration in favor of Palestine in Iceland. There was a demonstration in favor of Palestine going on while I was there, and I just joined it. And I told them it was because I supported Palestine. I was asked whether I would attend Palestinian demonstrations in future, and I said, yes, I most certainly will. I was asked what was said at the pro-Palestinian demonstration in Iceland, and I said, I have no idea because I don't speak Icelandic. It was a difficult experience. All of us have personal, intimate stuff with ourselves and our families, on our telephones and our laptops that we don't want the police to plow through. Everybody, as a citizen, is entitled to a certain amount of privacy. That is immediately stripped away from you. To do it under terrorism legislation, when you have not the remotest connection to terrorism, is a terrible thing. But this is not an isolated incident. We submitted to the United Nations examples of people, Professor John Lockland, who's a university professor in Paris. He was detained under anti-terrorism legislation in exactly the same way. Vanessa Beeley, an independent journalist, Johanna Ross, an independent journalist, Kit Clarenberg, an independent journalist. These are all people I know. These are all actually individuals with whom I'm connected. All of them have been detained, had all their electronics taken, and been questioned without the right to a lawyer under anti-terrorism legislation. In the case of Professor John Lockland, it appears to be, strangely, because he was in favour of Brexit. He's a gentleman who has no foreign connections. His politics are liberal stroke libertarian. He's a university professor and academic. He runs a podcast, not the remotest connection to terrorism. People are questioned particularly about where their finances, where their money comes from, who their connections are, and there appears to be a continual attempt to connect people to Russia. Whether or not they are connected to Russia, that appears to be what the security services wish to do. And particularly Joanna Ross, for example, who's a friend of mine and lives close to me in Edinburgh, she was questioned about her time when she was in charge of the Russian radio station Sputnik when it had an office in Edinburgh, at a time when it was perfectly legal for Sputnik to operate in Edinburgh. There's nothing illegal about what she did. She has a degree in Russian, she got the job, and she was working there. Nothing to do with terrorism. This abuse of anti-terrorist legislation is quite sickening. And since the current accelerated stage of genocide in Gaza, it has got worse. It's happened now to dozens, probably scores of people have been arrested for participating in demonstrations in favour of Palestine. Richard is going to follow and tell you what happened to him. Richard was actually arrested while on the way to speak on a panel with me about Palestine. He wasn't able to attend that panel and was prevented from speaking. The very next week, somebody who did speak on the panel with me about Palestine, Professor Danny Shaw from the United States, he was detained by the FBI on his way back to the United States and questioned and had all his electronics stolen and was questioned about his support for Palestine. We have a situation where not only is the West deeply complicit in the genocide in Palestine, the West, the ruling class of the West, is so scared of its own citizens that it is now prepared to persecute its own citizens in support of a genocide. And that is where we are today. Thank you.